All right, so welcome to something new that we're doing, which is the Inner Sanctum, which is going to be a series of videos like these, where we talk about basically everything that's going on in our lives, as well as some of our occult thoughts and some of the reflections, I guess, on what it's like to be a functioning occultist
Yes.
in 21st century life.
We are working through it with all of you, continuing to explore our practice and study and learn new things.
Yeah.
And I have not shared everything with you that we're going to talk about today. So we're just going to have a conversation about what we're thinking about and doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about and doing?
Well, it's the beginning of a new year, and right now that means that with School of Occult Arts, I am focused on essentially building that curriculum and creating what is a long-term vision, but is coming into being right now.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I've just been seeing you like surrounded by books and quite heavy tomes as well.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, because, and I think this kind of jumps into some of the other things we had talking about. And that is when you're building a curriculum for a school of occult arts of all things, there's a pressure to try and figure out what your school is actually going to be about. Like, so are you teaching ceremonial magic? Are you teaching chaos magic? Are you teaching Wicca? Are you teaching traditional craft?
Yeah.
And as an occultist, I actually really hate those distinctions.
Wow.
I think that
That's a surprise.
Maybe. I don't really know if it is, though. Like, to me, it's not. But I feel like when you're interested in the occult, you're interested in so many different things. But you and I have had this conversation that the occult is its own, like being an occultist, practicing occultism is its own unique path in magic. I would argue in the same way that ceremonial magic is, or that traditional witchcraft is, etc. It's a different focus and it has different application.
Yeah, I would say that distinction has been helpful for us. And I've always looked at it as like more almost the research side, like the dark academia, the studying side. Practicing occultism has been kind of steeped in my books the way you are in developing the curriculum. But it's not just all intellectualization. It's not all in your head either.
Right, it's not. And I think that's the crucial factor, like when you're creating something like the School of Occult Arts, where we really want our students to walk away with a background in occultism.
Being able to work magic well.
Yes.
And effectively.
There needs to be not a ready-made cosmology, but a way of talking with the universe and a way of like organizing magic in a teachable format so that people can get the most out of it, but also walk away with something that is distinctly occult. Because I do think the value of occultism is kind of what you described, which was it's the dark academia, it's the research, but it's not, as Pete Carroll says, like it's not just about research, because that's a total dead end if you're interested in practicing magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just like one small aspect you can't of experiencing the world, of learning. Is like reading through books or watching lectures as students at the School of Occult Arts would do at a very base level. But I think that in designing our classes, we definitely talk about philosophy a lot, and just thinking on your piece about like the cosmovision. Yeah. It's not just one thing.
It's not.
It's exploring many different traditions, although, you and I have definitely done that and kind of fallen in on one more specific one.
Yeah.
Not more specific, but one like that encompasses many different philosophies, just like Gaia and panpsychism, animism, and there are many names for a kind of view that's more broad, that's more spirit-based, that's kind of where we have fallen in our occultic practice. Occultic
Yeah. Well, as you're working through occult philosophy and occult like grimoires and all of these things, I think for every magician, every occultist, every witch, at some point they're like the measure of success is you build a cosmovision that functions, that actually works for you, but is somewhat unique. And so to look at this within School of Occult Arts language, as I'm building this curriculum, it's no secret that you and I have like a powerful relationship to chaos magic. Yes. But we also have a strong interest in kind of the ceremonial forms of magic. And the catch with this, and ceremonial magicians will likely come at me, but come at me. The catch with this is that most ceremonial magical forms, like for example, the Golden Dawn, are plugged into like an Edwardian industrial view of the universe.
Imperialist.
Very Western and very, very much rooted in this idea of like the British Empire controls the world and we understand everything with like machine thinking. And then magic, the metaphysics of it, has that same hierarchy and top-down approach. It also uses a lot of gods that don't necessarily capture imagination in the same way. And so when you look at the Golden Dawn, you see a lot of like overlays with Egyptian pantheon, which is informed by its time, right? Like in that period, there's this craze of uncovering ancient Egypt and the secrets of the pyramids and the pharaohs' tombs.
Not necessarily respecting that, but
no, definitely not respecting that. And also, it was that doesn't necessarily mean the magic didn't work, because it does. It's just that that pantheon and that way of thinking and that kind of captured imagination no longer stands today. There aren't too many ancient Egypt heads running around being like, I can't wait to find the next pyramid, right? Like,
it certainly stands for some people. And, just looking at Gaia's programming right now, it kind of like, I still get emails from them, and I still get the intros, the advertisements of the, ancient Egypt, the pyramid and stuff like that. And somebody's interested in it. But I think, as you're saying, like the more modern practitioner is looking for something a little bit different, something a little bit more in the zeitgeist.
Yes. And I think that actually is a better like development on what I'm saying, because it really is. It's not so much that people don't care about ancient Egypt. They do.
Yeah,
I personally care as well. It's just that we know more. Official narratives have changed. And so when we look at like a history of Hermeticism, we actually know a lot more about where Hermeticism comes from now than when Crowley was writing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we know more about these sources. We know more about this information. We know there's a different narrative around Egypt, like one that is based in like political structure, one that's based in archaeology. A lot of the things which people thought about ancient Egypt are different now. And so we can kind of see through the veneer of this idea of like an unbroken chain of knowledge from the Rosicrucians to the Golden Dawn that has to do with Hermeticism.
So what you're saying is like back when Crowley was alive and even before, because he didn't come up with ceremonial magic, there was a certain narrative about Egypt being like this unified, or Egyptian religion and Hermeticism being like this unified thing that had been, passed down as a whole.
Yeah.
And what you're saying now is we realize that there's more nuance and more complexity, and there was innovation.
And not even nuance and complexity. Some of it just is wholesale fake. Like some of it is like the Rosicrucians did not actually exist.
Wow.
So
powerful and sad statement.
Yeah, I know. Like there was no Christian Rosencrantz, and that's fine. But in that specific space,
The Alchemical Wedding has that author.
Okay.
I'm just
I don't know if it does.
I'm just teasing because many occult books have
yeah,
like the 3 initiates,
right, exactly.
Hermes Trismegistus,
and that's not wrong.
That
No, but I think the same thing is true when we look at like a better, maybe more modern example is like this idea of Celtic witchcraft.
Okay.
It doesn't really exist. Like we actually know more now about the history of like the quote unquote the burning times. We know more about that now, and we know that the burning times didn't actually exist. And that's okay, but that means that when we engage with these magical sources, we're not bringing that belief component in the same way, because we have to turn off part of our brain that says, but this is metaphor, this is myth, this is not real.
Because the narrative is different.
Right.
Okay.
And so
I can see that it's evolved over time for sure. And it does exist in reality insofar as people are creating this idea of the burning times of Celtic witchcraft. And in that way, it is real and workable from a magical perspective. Very workable.
To be clear, very workable, very real. In that it's real in the imaginal.
But maybe a little ahistorical.
It's ahistorical. It's different. And I'm not saying that history is like this known scientific quantity.
Yeah.
It's simply it's the zeitgeist, as you said. Like
the belief.
Right. In 1970 something, when when the neo-pagan revival was really popping off, and you have like, a bunch of people who are like, I'm from an unbroken oral tradition of Celtic witch covens, and now I know everything like about magic, and I'm doing magic within the system. The magic they're doing hasn't changed between 1970 and 2022. What's changed is in popular consciousness, we know more about the narratives around like the witch trials. And so we know that a complete arm of this idea of like an unbroken oral tradition simply does not exist. And so you have to figure out a way to
in this culture
right now,
United States.
Right. So you have to figure out a way to undergird that belief piece and make it make sense to you now. Like, is there a better magical, and I guess this all kind of comes into one like key quote, I guess, or key takeaway is magical systems are built for the times they're in. Like they evolve out of the time that they are practiced and the time they are for. And I think you could make a strong argument that the Golden Dawn is not for 2022 or 2023. However,
because the needs have changed, the beliefs have changed.
Exactly. The beliefs have changed, the needs have changed, the practices have changed. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't good stuff in the Golden Dawn. And I think that's like the reactionary take of like modern, like TikTok kind of occultists and whatnot, is this sudden rejection of like Crowley's a bad guy. The Golden Dawn isn't based on anything real, so we should just blow it out the window. And that's actually like, there are powerful things in the Golden Dawn. The power is not Christian Rosencrantz and, Hathor. The power is the ceremonial forms, and they can be extrapolated and applied to other like metaphysics.
Yeah, and that reminds me of our newsletter, which is called Ani.Mystic, which is a phrase that I encountered when I was researching commentary on the Greek magical papyri. Someone wrote of one of the papyrus. Someone wrote about a section that there's some good stuff in there. There's stuff about Greek religion. There's stuff about all types of religion, Christian, Judaic. But then there's a lot of other stuff, and we're just going to call that fromage mystique, which is like some sort of like mystery trees, mystic cheese, and that's gnosis. That's personal, and therefore we don't value that because it's not a reflection of a religious structure.
And that's
what I'm thinking for ceremonial magic, Golden Dawn. There's gnosis in there. That's personal. That's coming from someone's practice and study. And what happens when you actually put things into a tradition or a book? You actually do put a lot of yourself in there. You're channeling different things most of the time. Unless you're written by an AI, which
just
but doesn't mean it's not useful. It doesn't mean it's not good.
No, and it's hard though, and this is where being an occultist matters, because a witch, someone who just rolls in and maybe invests a ton of time and effort and energy in collecting, like, say, Gemmingary traditional witchcraft books, of which we have quite a few.
Yes.
Someone who comes into that tradition is looking for the tradition, is looking for all of the aesthetics and all of the magic around it. But generally speaking, they are not engaging in research in the same way. Where the occult perspective, I think, is really, occult obviously means hidden. And it's one of those things of like, what is hidden, even within the hidden work? Like, what is hidden within the Golden Dawn that is powerful, useful, transformational, and incredible and needs to be preserved?
Yeah.
But is difficult to parse, because a lot of people buy magic books
or convey.
Yeah, a lot of people buy magical books or magical courses, and what they're really buying is like a solution to a life problem. So they're like, okay, I'm just going to buy this and it will fix my life somehow. Like, I'm buying a solution.
Things.
That's most people. That's capitalism.
That's most things that you buy.
Yes. Most people who engage with those are not then taught to engage with them as documents that can be kind of deconstructed. Like, deconstruction was not, I don't think until recently, a really powerful or prominent part of the magical journey. It was mostly like reaction against hegemony.
What do you mean by deconstruction? Because that's a word that I apply very carefully.
Sure. I guess within that, I mean that because most of us in the Western, like, United States, most practicing pagans, occultists, witches, etc., come from Christianity. Most of them wash out of the Christian church, and like, that's just the numbers. So most of the people who have come out of Christianity are coming out of, like, as you said, this religious structure of, here is the dogma, here is the belief, like, you have to plug into these specific things to be part of our church body and not a heretic or apostate or whatever. So most people bring that same relationship with the gods, as well as their same non-critical eye to the work they encounter. So rather than just saying the Bible isn't for me, and now I'm going to really delve deep into, I don't know, I'm looking at my bookcase here, the Necronomicon. Instead of taking the Necronomicon as a experiment in chaos magic, in Lovecraftian themes, in Watcher Enochian magic, they take the Necronomicon and simply just apply, it is now their new Bible. And so everything the Necronomicon says is treated with the same reverence as everything the Bible says.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the temptation. So that's what you're saying about deconstruction.
So what I'm saying is, deconstruction is the ability then, in the way I'm using that word, is I get the Necronomicon, and rather than treating it like a new Bible, rather than treating it like something that is the word of God, quote unquote, if you believe that, I take the Necronomicon, and someone who's deconstructing it gets into, well, who is Peter Levinda? Who is Simon? What is this written about? Why are these Lovecraftian entities like part and parcel of this book? What are the magical traditions that undergird it, like Enochian or chaos magic?
Talking about reading critically.
Yeah, essentially. And then being able to take the things that you read critically and take the things that apply. This is the chaos magic piece of like, what actually matters here?
What works?
Well, I don't like to say works, because that's an unfair. I want to hear why you want to use the word works first, because I think I could agree with you, but I currently feel like there is a valuable criticism of chaos magic, that it is purely like base level, whatever works to get me through my life. And a lot of criticisms levied at chaos magic from ceremonial magicians is like, it's all witchcraft. It's all just the base level. You're just, trying to get rich or trying to heal an illness or trying to make miracles happen. But you're neglecting the journey of the higher self, the journey of consciousness that ceremonial magic alleges it does so well.
I see.
I don't think that's actually true. And so I like to say what matters with chaos magic, because I think that's what chaos magic does really well, is it gets to what actually matters here. Is it Lovecraft, Thoth, Hathor, or is it my belief in these entities, beings, and the way I organize a spirit model?
Well, I'm thinking insofar as what matters is what works for you and what works in your cosmovision.
Yeah.
And you decide ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
Because we're all doing hermeneutics.
We are.
Hermes, shout out. So I think when you're talking about thinking critically about these occult works and deconstruction, we're not like taking it apart. We're not saying we're not appreciating it.
Sure.
We're merely looking for hidden knowledge underneath it, challenging certain things that might not actually matter or work.
Yeah.
And innovating on a tradition that some of them
needs to innovate. Like
some traditions and a lot of works that we read require innovation.
I think they do. And then again, this is like a very chaos magic perspective, right? Like the magic that you have is the magic for your time. And magic is a living tradition. Like it should consistently be growing as a science and an art.
Yes. So all magic is time magic. Yes.
I guess so.
Because we are operating within time. And yet magic does not necessarily operate within time.
Right.
Except that you're doing it in a specific time.
You're doing it in time, and I don't think we can separate ourselves from time.
So we are actually So the actual practitioner or the magician is like basically equated to the timing feature.
I think so.
Because of we are the ones working magic in a specific period.
Yeah, and I think that gets into like the planetary aspect of magic, like time as in days of the week, 365 days in a year, whatever. That is not so that's useful for like mundane, but it's not useful in terms of like orienting your life towards magic. Like astrological bodies though, and astrology is, and that still is a calendar, but I think there's something more real in terms of effect of the movement of the heavenly bodies as opposed to the movement of a second hand on the clock. One is a meaning making tool and the other one is a meaning causing tool.
Wow. Did you just come up with that?
I think so. Yes. That's mine.
One is a meaning making tool, the clock, and the other is a meaning causing tool. I mean, meaning is layered in many ways.
It is.
And so causation is one of those funny things also.
But I think that's why, like, then the magician.
That we can't be sure of.
Oh, sure. I think that's why, though, then the magician can actually go back and do time magic, like do magic for the future, magic for the past, because the magician is outside of this, like, recognizes the clock and says, yes, there's meaning making, there's meaning creation here. Like I can use this tool to structure my daily life so that I don't go like insane, and so I can keep meetings and like whatever. However, as soon as that stops being useful, the magician then knows that like this is simply a tool.
It is, yeah.
And I don't need it.
It's a little bit arbitrary.
It is. So I'm saying all this because like when we've been, to get back to like the book thing that you were talking about, and like we've both been surrounded by tomes, the question really for us for School of Occult Arts has been, what is, when we're building a curriculum, what is it that we, that as like someone who's gone through this journey, what is something that feels vital from places like the Golden Dawn, from places like witchcraft, from authors like Crowley or Eliphas Levi or Israel Regardie, that still matters, but that we can plug into a cosmovision for now? And I think a great many practical working magicians would recognize in some way that animism is the medicine for now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this goes beyond magicians.
Yeah.
these are many people outside of magical traditions believe that animism or Gaia or being driven by, spirits and that piece, thinking along the lines of spiritualism, they think that is medicine as well. Is helpful, is a better way to relate to our natural world and to ourselves, our universe. So yeah, I mean, that's where we stand. That's what we've found, and we have read some excellent works.
Yeah, some recommendations
along those lines, talking about animism and magic or the paranormal.
Yeah. But I mean, before we jump into what those recommendations are, because they are very good, I know we've both been, as we've been working through this curriculum, experimenting with ceremonial forms to see what is transferable and what is still incredibly useful from a ceremonial perspective.
Okay.
Yeah. So what is I know you've been working specifically with the Celtic Golden Dawn. John Michael Greer is the editor and compiler on that. It's an excellent book if you're interested in like merging Celtic pantheons and concepts with a Golden Dawn ceremonial form.
Yeah.
But what's been your feeling on that and experience?
I once again have desired more time to look into this, because I've really just honestly been working through like 3 or 4 pages.
Yeah.
Which might sound obscene, but but there's a lot in those 3 or 4 pages, and it's been around lesser summoning and lesser banishing. So it's been a daily practice, and I've found it to be very useful. So this is where occultism is helpful in reading, studying, reflecting, and actually the doing.
Yeah.
The doing is important because there's a lot to learn and literally practice. Practice the forms, practice the vocalizations. And one piece that I've been considering, which is another rabbit hole in magic, is when the instructor tells you to vibrate the words. And so I've done a few internet searches. I've done some deep thinking on this idea, and some exploring like different ways to actually vibrate, intonate the magic words that accompanies many ritual magical workings. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that idea and what works what works best for you.
Yeah. I think that the sound component is a vital one.
Vibration.
Yeah, vibration specifically.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, from my like understanding of Hermeticism and from my understanding of like some of these traditions, that idea of vibration of sound seems to be something that is built into the Western tradition of magic. There is something definitely more powerful than like doing it in the imaginal or doing it silently. To vibrate and to feel that resonance through the body and in the air and in the space. And I forget, I wish I could remember this, because I forget who was talking about this specifically. And it might have been Damien Eccles, but I could be wrong. This idea that the sound is not so much important as it is the vibration or the way in which like the waves of sound move and are internalized by both the conjurer or the invocational or the occultist, and then the people or lack of people or spirits who then receive those sounds and make meaning out of them. Like, it's not so much the word like Yod Hovahe that has internalized power. It's the way that sound wave moves that actually has resonance.
Yeah, I think there's that. And in my quick research on this, someone brought up when you that idea of singing a note at a wine glass, matching its frequency.
Yes.
And, shattering it. So making material changes in the world through vibration. Through something we can't see, but something we feel.
Yeah.
And something that, as you said, what's really important is that you're feeling it in your body and you are projecting it into the world. And this is like, this is the base quality of magic. Yeah. Feeling it in your body and projecting it into the world. And in that way, it's like a secret of magic within that. So it's been really fun to like study and think about just this tiny piece of a very common ritual, and really explore how to vibrate the words, the projection, the note I choose, because I can go lower and project more from my torso, or I can go higher, which is where I normally talk. I think lower is better. Yeah. But all these different like experiments and ways of thinking about vibration. I keep looking over at our desk because I'm reminding myself by this action to talk about the Greek magical papyri. The Mithras liturgy in the PGM has a lot of vibrations and intonations and sounds. Yeah. Which is just another example of this manuscript being like composed at the latest around 300 CE, of how long these concepts have been around and have magicians have practiced it. I'm sure it's before then, but using like and sounds as well to like, I don't know, project something that's not just about theater, not just about getting names right, but it's about vibration and sound. Something to really sit with and explore. And as you can see, I'm very excited about this. No, definitely. And it's literally 3 or 4 pages of this book. So, and that's I don't know how anyone in their lifetime works through. No, to underscore this, I think this is the thing that ceremonial magic does so well. Ceremonial magic gives the aspirant, the initiate, whatever you want to call them, gives them the tools that make for just good, strong magic. Like it gets right to the point of how you gain mastery over the body, mastery over the mind, the things that like you need to bring into unity, and it helps strengthen your will. So like these kinds of explorations, or some of the meditations that the Golden Dawn gives as like reflection points, like let the novice just focus on a point in space and meditate on the point in space for 15 minutes, and then write down everything that you've realized about the point in space. When you first sit down to write this, you're like, there's no way this will be useful. Like, what am I doing here? And then like 7 days later, you have 7 pages full of observations about like a mathematical point that has no measurable nature. It has no dimension, and yet everything in the world emanates from it. And you get all these like incredible, crazy downloads of information. What the math? Yes. So I think that stuff is amazing. Yeah. There's a lot to draw from in there. And so when you were building the curriculum, you're taking, you're utilizing these pieces and you're referencing these pieces, but we're also bringing in the animism and chaos magic. Yeah, we're just giving it a new wall to plug into, to borrow like that analogy I think Gordon White initially came up with of like, what outlet is this plugged into? Like, as an outlet in a wall gets power, and then you plug something into it to get power from it. Instead of like, in my mind, the idea of, again, the Rosicrucians, MacGregor Mather's work in the Golden Dawn, while important, is that power outlet of like Edwardian pre-industrial, or like right during the Industrial Revolution. That outlet, if it has any power at all, it's far less power than it used to, because it's not part of the zeitgeist. It's not part of the collective unconscious in the same way that it used to be. Yeah, I mean, we're not in those eras. Right. So now we're just taking, okay, here's the structure of this, and let's plug it into the new outlet that fits for this time, that is in the zeitgeist, that is at the forefront of people's thoughts and
the discourse, whatever that is.
Yeah. The singular discourse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a process, and it's going to require a lot of, I imagine over the next year, obviously, and I think in perpetuity, the curriculum will always be growing and shifting and refining because it has to. But I really do, I think I've said this before and I will continue to say it. One of the most frustrating things when we talk about like new, like people who are into magic or just got into it, and this is something that is a product of social media too, is the lack of attention to the foundational principles. Because everybody wants to just jump into summoning a demon or making themselves rich overnight or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But very few people like buy a magic book and are excited to read the first page, which is like, achieve motionlessness for 15 minutes before moving on to focusing on your breath for 30 minutes. Nobody wants to hear that, right?
I think that's normal. I
Sure
resonate with such things.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And does foundations, does that look the same for everyone? Is there agreement on what is foundational?
I think in the Western canon, yes, because it's all come from like somewhere. It all kind of boils back to Hermeticism in pretty much every way.
Okay.
Even chaos magic, which a lot of people say is like its own thing, very clearly comes out of ceremonial magic. It's just that further refinement and distillation and, exploration.
Evolution.
Yeah, which it should.
Mm-hmm.
It should have. And that might be a very sprawling type of evolution. Like it's not necessarily always going to be getting better. However, it's...
Isn't evolution sprawling in nature?
I think, yes.
I ask leading questions sometimes.
Of course.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And but you're right, I do think there are, I just, for many people, when you think of foundations, I don't think that they see something that's unified or accessible for them to learn unless they're like following actual occult traditions or occult teachers like SOA or something like that. I don't think there's an idea of like, oh, okay, I just study, or I read a book on Hermeticism, or Agrippa, or I read, the Kabbalion. Ask any like occultist, witch, magician. I think you'd get as many answers as many people you ask, and that's similar to the Margot Adler book, where she wrote about neo-paganism. And it's a really, really good book. It's called Drawing Down the Moon. And she has a chapter, at least, on magic. And it's just all these different definitions of how people see and interface with magic. And I can't say that any of them would be close to wrong.
Sure.
They're all right. And this is the difference between talking about what is foundational versus what is magic, which is a concept. But I do think that maybe one challenge of our times is this diffuse nature of occult knowledge.
I mean, it always has been, but this is a great point because
we're localized in like different regions.
Well, yes.
And because of that, it was helpful to have an idea of foundations.
Yes.
And certain teachers who taught those.
And the cultural landscape was different.
I could be wrong.
No, I don't. I think it's harder today to get good at occult work simply because there's too much of it. There is like years, even 150 years ago, to have, a modest collection of occult works was difficult to do. Like you had to find someone who is, often these books are very limited run or one of a kind, even in some cases.
Unless you're John Dee.
Sure. But even John Dee, his focus is, John Dee, as best I can tell, does not have a schema of magic that looks like the one today. it does not have the, like, his access to materials would not have included like, and here's a book about fairies, and here's a book about, you know, UFO sightings, and here's a book about, like, it's
different.
Even the library that he was able to amass was still limited by, or his like attention was still not affected by the things that affect our attention span today.
Yeah, I mean, John Dee is a really bad example because he is a special case.
Yeah, literally. But I do think that today we have too much information. And so I've had this conversation with you, and I
talk about noise versus signal.
Yeah. Like how much of what we're imbibing when we read these occult books is just noise, how much is signal, and then how much is affected by the fact that we don't have good attention spans anymore. Like that is something that people have written about at length, of like, you know, TikTok, Reels, whatever, social media is engineered to demand our attention, and our attention spans are getting shorter. And anecdotally, I mean, you can look online and see people complaining nonstop about like, oh, when I was a kid, I used to be able to read, you know, a whole chapter of a book at night, and now I can't read like 2 pages before I'm picking up my phone and wasting another hour on TikTok. And that's not like old man yells at cloud. That is, when you only have a limited number of resources, I think it's easier to get really good at those resources.
Yeah, I think that's true. So how do we manage the sheer amount of everything? How do we manage everything everywhere all at once for a movie?
I mean, when it comes to magic, like, I really think the step that a lot of us miss, and I missed this step, is that you aren't the solutions to the problems that surround you, or the things you want addressed, or the reason you're doing magic. Because you're not doing magic for, if you're doing magic, you recognize that there's something in your life that's not easily addressed or explained or comfortable, and you're trying to change it. I think that the realization comes for practitioners between like being someone who maybe reads a lot about magic or knows a lot about magic to someone who's very good at doing magic, is the recognition that it's all inside of you.
Recognition.
Yeah.
And wow, it's all inside of me.
Yeah. I mean, once you recognize that like you can't buy a book that's going to fix your life, that you are the only way to fix your life, and the only way to fix yourself, or to experience spiritual journeys or transformations of consciousness, or talk to angels, or whatever you want to do, the only way to do that is to get clear on these like really these pieces of kind of first principles of exploration of the consciousness, and you know, finding out the will.
So inner knowledge. Wait, what's that occult principle? Know thyself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's where this comes into play.
And then you don't need all these other things.
I think, yeah, for most of us, and for many books, maybe not most books, but we could literally just buy the one book and work on that. And continue our focus and exploration of that work and what's under the work. Well, and have that be, you know, a pathway towards self-help or mastery over the self in life.
Yeah, because it's not, I think magic has been so informed right now in this moment. Magic is so informed by popular culture. And I guess it should be. Like if we look back to, there's this interesting phenomenon that if you were to look back at like, say, I don't know, 1300, some serfdom somewhere in continental Europe, there's a group of people who have very little access to like books and information. But whatever they do have access to, they have like a great deal of attention. I think the strength of the mind may have, I don't want to say it was better, but there was a different way of relating to the world. And everyone around you had this same intense focus and concentration, insofar as there just aren't as many distractions. Like if you are a serf in the Middle Ages, like You can't like you might actually just hear the noise of people around you. Like you're not going to hear, you can't put on your iPod and start listening to a podcast or music, you know? You can't read a newspaper. Like there just aren't any. So there's that.
Should we be Luddites?
Right. No, because there's that super consciousness in those unique individual areas. Like, so we have like a pocket of people who have a firm system of beliefs and like intense concentration, whatever. It's different than it is now. And then right next door, like 100 miles away, you have a different pocket of people with different beliefs and like, but that's still that same kind of like within those small spheres, there is intense shared consciousness.
Sure.
So but like today,
a real awareness of your local.
Yeah, a real awareness of your local wildlife, of your local plants, of thoughts, of the politics of like small towns. Like
we talk more to people that are in our spaces because we can't talk to people who are out of our spaces.
Right. And today we kind of have an inverse of that, where there's like a global super consciousness of people who are like, whether you live in like the remotest region of somewhere in like, you know, India, or you live in a thriving metropolitan capital of like the Western world, like New York City, or you live in Japan, yeah, you know who Captain America is. You know who Iron Man is. You know who Batman is. I hate that too. Like that's garbage. But there's so many additional there's so many additional signals. There's so many distractions. There's so many TikToks and social media platforms and news, and I can get news on my phone and like whatever. We have these like globalist kind of entertainment commodities and like symbol sets like the MCU. But we also then don't have the attention span. So it's like the symbol set has had to get bigger, louder, and dumber to break through to everybody.
Right.
And that there's benefits to that.
Or maybe not, right? I don't know.
There's benefits to that. But I think that's like the kind of flip of like where things stand currently from a magical perspective.
Is the level of distraction, but then also the pervasiveness of symbols that are not necessarily helpful or useful.
Yeah, that we don't fully understand the meaning of. Yeah.
But I personally believe that we don't fully understand the meaning of any symbol. But you're saying we don't understand maybe the intention behind some of the most pervasive symbols.
Sure. I guess the intention is a good good way to look at it.
Maybe it's just to make money, for us to look at it more.
Some people make that connection, but I don't think everyone does. I think the vast majority, and again, this is like all anecdotal, I guess, but like at what point do we have, like at what point does this stuff have power in the same way that like myths do? This is like getting into like a deeper conversation, I guess. But
yeah,
if you look at like,
we're gonna have to probably wind it down because we can't begin to talk about myths.
No.
Although, can we avoid talking about?
I don't think you necessarily can. And that's the thing with when we talk about like, you know, building an occult curriculum, then you're looking at like, okay, what is mythology? Yeah, exactly.
If you want to make a pie, first create the universe. And I guess that's what you are encountering. I wouldn't say you have to do it, but I'm saying you're encountering it.
Yeah. So when we're doing like magic, then I think it gets difficult today to talk about like what is first practice, what is like a basic principle. But the benefit that we all have is that we get to choose what those things are. We don't necessarily get to choose how powerful the magic is, because I think that is, it's not fixed, but there's definitely things that make it better and things that make it less good. However, on a personal level, maybe it doesn't matter so much.
Depends on your beliefs in it.
And it depends on what you want.
Willingness to engage with it.
Like if you want an identity, and you just want to be a witch or be a magician, then it really doesn't matter if you're actually doing the work, because what you get out of it is the identity of it. If you want to do the work and like have a real like,
what is identity?
Like if you just want your identity, if you just want the way you present in the world in like a consumable, like
more aesthetic.
Yeah, like an aesthetic, so that people who see someone walking down the street knows what subculture they're a part of. Witch is one of them. And that's fine. Like there are a lot of people who are like, I'm a witch. And it's like, okay, cool. But then what that term means to them is I get to wear a hat, I get to be a little spooky ooky, and I practice alternative spirituality.
Yeah.
That is very different than like traditional witchcraft.
I wouldn't go so far as to like describe what other people are thinking or feeling or their requirements of their identity as a witch. But I would say that is what like we've talked a lot about mainstream magic and developed a lecture on it.
Yes.
And how capitalism has kind of subsumed witchcraft, a certain type of witchcraft.
Well, it has to.
It does.
Because that's like
its job.
That's capitalism.
That's its job, to subsume everything. And kind of undercut the deeper things, kind of hidden it further, even.
It does.
Made it more occult.
It does. And that's like the power of being an occultist, I think, is you get to then actively engage in that searching process, digging through kind of the reams of garbage and finding the things that actually have value.
Well, what is garbage?
I mean, what is garbage? I have a strong take on that.
You do, and we're not going to talk about it.
I think
not in this very nice conversation. So yeah, that's what we're doing this week and for the coming weeks. I wanted to talk about some other pieces, but I don't think we're gonna have time today.
I think we have time to do some book recs.
Okay.
We definitely should, to give people, if you're interested in this conversation and what some of the things we've said are like, ooh, that really speaks to me. School of Occult Arts, the new semester begins in February, so you should definitely sign up for that. But if you don't want to join School of Occult Arts just yet, check out some of these books.
So we talked about today The Celtic Golden Dawn by John Michael Greer.
Yes.
And the 4 pages that I have read so far. I'm just kidding, I read a few more. What we didn't talk about, but has influenced our time in this conversation, has been Liber, Null, and Psychonaut.
Liber, Null, and Psychonaut. This is a very good introduction to the practice of chaos magic by one of the founders of chaos magic. Definitely worth your time if you're interested in what makes a workable system.
Yeah, it's a deceptively shortish.
Yeah, it's
simple-ish. It's very straightforward.
It's straightforward, which is something we love about chaos magic, but it is deep and it does require reflection and it requires completing things before you move to the next.
Other books that we've been sitting with for months now, fairly new release, Ani.Mystic by Gordon White, talking about animism and different indigenous traditions and beliefs that are medicine for our times, that have certainly informed our thinking. And there's been a lot of feedback loop there in the way that magic and synchronicities work. Yeah. We've also found Greening the Paranormal. This one really went under the radar, I think. I haven't heard many people talking about it. It is a collection of essays by anomalists and para-anthropologists, edited by Jack Hunter, but it's an incredible work, and I'm only halfway through it, but it talks about encountering the supernatural or the anomalous with a perspective of animism, something around animism, and kind of one of the theses of the book is the idea that encountering the supernatural or recognizing that it exists can help us to have a better way to interface with our reality and nature in particular, because we understand that it is more alive, more complex, more sentient than we previously, I can't say previously, than the current narrative would have us understand.
Yeah. And I have been also working through the Pocket Austin Osman Spare. Austin Osman Spare did, well, quite a great deal of work with sigil magic, and his work with like the idea of Kia is something that definitely informs chaos magic. I find his work to be, in many ways, kind of like prototypical of LeVay. I don't know if LeVay was aware of Spare, but some of the things and some of their style is that same kind of like, the same kind of like apocalyptic railing against organized religion, and then like what the personal spiritual journey is. Definitely interesting if you are practicing chaos magic and want to know a little bit more about Spare's contributions, but also interesting just from the perspective of what happens when we strip magic, specifically ceremonial magic, down to its first principles. Like, what is the real value of something that's ceremonial versus something that is more intuitive or more aware of the fact that ceremonial magic can often be a little stuffy, a little feeling like it's out of touch. Yeah, Spare specifically criticizes Crowley in a very, very veiled reference. Well, not very veiled, a thinly veiled reference to Crowley, where he basically says that he's an unemployed dandy. So if you like to take catty cracks at other occultists, no, I'm all for unemployed dandies, and I'm all for, Austin Osman Spare. So
that's your platform.
That's the platform.
And that's where we're going to end it today.
That is.
That's just some of the stuff we've been working on this week. Hopefully we will continue this series.
So what you can expect is on Thursdays, we're just going to upload these to our YouTube channel and share them out. They are informal. They are kind of our reflections and thoughts. We call it the Inner Sanctum because you kind of get inside of our heads. Some of the things we say, we may come out against in the future. We might grow and evolve and learn, and
that's the idea.
That's the idea.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your week.